I'll introduce it and then I'll let Boyce take over the first shift here. So yeah, welcome to the world of audio. This is Boyce Johnson. You guys have probably met this guy, I'm hoping at least one time this yesterday or today. And I'm Alan Luckett, so he's got the Madison channel, I got Janesville's channel. We're gonna go over a little bit about different ways of capturing sound. I'm gonna probably cover a little things, more for the entertainment end of things, and he's gonna cover more of the, the press briefing, the more governmental, how can we capture it the best way we possibly can. And then we'll field any kind of questions. He's got samples he's going to show. I'm going to show a PowerPoint after we're done, so that way you can get an idea of what other stuff there is out there. I didn't want to bring everything in the world, but he brought lots of goodies. So,
it's a block away.
So I'll pass the microphone to Boyce and let him show you all his toys.
Okay. Huh? All right. So what I guess what I'm going to talk about specifically is press conferences. That's something that we find ourselves covering a lot. Do any of you find yourselves covering those? Or? Yeah. We had a big one last week. We had an arson weekend before that made the national news. So we had a massive press event with, I think, at least 12 cameras rolling in, and news out, not just our local folks that we're used to, but folks rolling in from all over the place. So we do a lot of that, and so I just kind of wanted to go over some of the stuff that we use for that, and just some of the concepts and some things that help out. So, and I'm just dealing with audio. So I mean, as far as the video end of things, the camera setups that you see here are the same setups that we would use for press conferences. Just a basic single camera. The lighting instruments that we've got in the big room, we'll sometimes bring those depending upon where things are. So I guess first consideration is microphones, and normally, we'll use either a gooseneck mic. Gooseneck mic. This is a mono price. Gooseneck mic costs next to nothing, and the sound quality from this we found to be pretty comparable to Shure gooseneck mics that are nearly $300 a piece, I believe. I don't know if they make them anymore. I mean, the thing about Monoprice, if you're familiar with them, they'll make things and sell things for a year or two, and then they'll disappear, and then they'll start selling new things. They've sold drum hardware for a while. I have a kick drum pedal and a hi-hat stand from the brief period when they were doing that. But they're a great company to look at if you want cheap gear that actually works really well. Other than that, we have a tendency to use the classic Shure SM57. Presidents have been talking into these since, I believe, Nixon. It's the standard microphone. I think they're more handsome with the windscreen, but that's up to you. And we normally will throw in just these little stands. You just put it in the same bag that the microphone is in. That'll work most of the time. What I will recommend, though, if you can, bring a boom mic and don't put the mic on the lectern, because people do this. So if you can suspend that, get it away from that, acoustically decouple it from the furniture, you're better off. The one thing with that, though, make sure that this is tight, otherwise over time it will creep. And that too, yeah. So that's going to capture the person who's speaking, the person who's at the lectern. It's not a bad idea to also try to capture the questions that are coming from the press. What we'll do in that case, in addition to just doing a single microphone, we'll usually also run into a field mixer. These are from Sound Devices, which is a company in Reedsburg. They're fantastic. They're not inexpensive, but we love their products, and their service is great, and they're right up the road. So I would, if you've got the budget for it, I would highly recommend it. Otherwise, Zoom has cheaper, similar field mixers. There are other manufacturers that have them. So we will typically use something like that. So we have the main microphone that's on the lectern, and then we'll also, to capture questions from the press, we'll often have the audio operator with a shotgun. This is a Sennheiser basic short shotgun. And so, they're going to be running this mixer. They can just kind of point the shotgun at whoever's asking questions. Got a windscreen if you're out in the elements. And what we'll typically do is, we got stereo outputs on the mixer, so we'll run one channel into, you don't always need it, but we find, especially if we're in a location like on the steps of the city county building or the municipal building, which of course the people who do these, mayors, it's like, oh, we want a pretty background, so let's go and set this up on this corner, but with traffic, rolling by. So we do find ourselves often, in addition to recording it, we want to provide some amplification. So, and the speaker that Alan's got right here, those work great for that. We just bought this thing, which is a really nice, also JBL, portable PA system. It all breaks down. This comes apart and it stows in the back. The battery is actually located in this segment right here. It's all rechargeable. So you just charge it up. Don't have to worry about power in the field. Just roll it out, put it together. This, I think it's the Eon 1 Pro. It's from JBL.
They have several different kinds. I mean, if you're just doing sound reinforcement like this one's a good one to go with. That bottom speaker is actually a subwoofer, but it just helps carry the sound, and it makes it nice and even as it goes out. But you can put a band into that and play out. So.
And the thing that I like about these, I'm also a musician, so I've seen, especially like acoustic acts, use these all the time. They work really well. They're small ensembles like jazz trios and things like that. Really excellent feedback rejection. I've seen people set these up like behind the mic line, and
then it serves as a monitor and sound reinforcement at
the
same time.
Yep. So we just got this, but I mean these sort of pillar PAs are great. And a small form factor. It hasn't arrived yet, but we've got wheels coming for this and a case for it. But the supply chain, I guess the caster industry is slow. But yeah.
Price?
Boyce.
Price.
Oh, price.
No, it's just audio crap. What do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of that stuff is like anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, depending upon how much wattage you want to push out.
Yep. So what we'll typically do is we'll run one channel of the field mixer into a PA system. And we don't always have that. If we're in like a conference room or something where it's a controlled environment, we don't worry about it. But again, if you're on the steps of the city hall and you've got buses coming by, doesn't hurt. The other channel we will run to a press box, because what we don't want is a pile of microphones on the lectern. So a couple of options there. This is a passive press box. Cheap, lightweight, easy to haul around. The one caveat, you have to feed it with a line level signal, and it can only put out mic level signals. So in order to split it into all of these channels, it has to be able to lower the level. So you're stuck with that. And that's fine in most cases. I mean, any field mixer is going to be able to put out line level, and the press, generally speaking, you're going to want a mic level anyways, because that's what they've got running into their cameras. So these work fine. If you're in, just quickly before we move on, for capturing questions, a shotgun if you've got an audio operator to do it. Otherwise, it's a PZM, it's a boundary mic. Just put it out on a table, on the floor, or somewhere near where the people who are asking the questions are. But this is why it's important to separate your channels coming out of the mixer. Do not put this in that. That is going to be feedback immediately. So this should only go to the signal that's going to this and that's going to your camera. So it's a passive press box. This is an active press box. So this requires power, but this will take either a mic or line input. It's got 2 inputs, 16 outs, each one of those switchable between mic and line level. We are real glad we had this last week when at least 12 cameras rolled into the room from news outlets. They were all able to use this. We had 1 microphone on the lectern. Looks neat, works well. I didn't bring any wireless equipment with me today, but obviously that's always an option too. Little plug-on transmitters you can attach to any microphone or anything you want if you are in a situation where you can't run cables. So, one other thing that I brought with, you want to have good headphones. The Sony 7506 is pretty standard. You're going to find them in every recording studio in the world. These are 7506 elements or speakers in an aviation hard case. So this is not necessarily a press conference thing, but I love these. This has got the 7506. The reason to go with that is it's absolutely accurate. It's not going to color the sound, especially if you buy or use consumer headphones or earbuds or things like that. They're designed to make music sound good. They're going to color the sound. They're going to boost certain frequencies and drop certain frequencies. Something like a Sony 7506, it's accurate. What you're hearing is what's there. You're hearing the actual signal as it's going to be passed through your chain. So I would strongly recommend those. And this is a company called Remote Audio. They take those speakers and they put them in a hard shell. So if you ever have to do something like cover concerts, like loud amplified concerts, these are fantastic. So I think that's all the toys that I brought. Oh, and not audio, but the Magliner, Gemini Jr., America's favorite light metal hand truck. That's the best investment you're going to make. Those things will last 20 years, and you can't live without them. But, so, that's, I guess, all I have. If you have questions, or you want to move on to Ellen, or...
I just have one question. The headphones that you had there, they were the Sony 7506. Then did you have the coverings put on separately?
No, it's a company called Remote Audio, and so they manufacture a version of the 7506 with the aviation shells around them.
D&H has them. They're $370.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, the model number is HN-7506.
Yep.
Yeah, you just plug that in, check D&H's website, you can find it. But I'd always say, whenever you're buying gear, have yourself a couple local vendors. I buy a lot of stuff for Full Compass, you do too.
Yep.
And I got a salesperson there. So what's listed on their site is not necessarily going to be the price. So
No.
I always end up asking, what's your price? Because they could say, well, it's on the website. It's like, okay, well, I can find another vendor, and they can probably shave 10 or 20 bucks off.
Yep, and especially if you're government too, they will often give discounts, especially if you throw a lot of business their way. And we certainly do for Full Compass, as they're happy to drop prices on things.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to go cheap with headphones, though, because of price points, keep in mind you really want something that's going to be closed. So that way you're not hearing the audience and all the things that are out there. Now, then again, if you're doing a lot of filming in areas where cars are driving everywhere, then you might want to hear outside your headphones. But most of the time, we want to be kind of isolated. So, all right. Then I'm going to dabble in a couple other crazy things. And like Boyce, I'm a musician, so I've been playing and recording in many different formats over the years, and I enjoy digital quite a bit. So here's my little presentation here. Obviously, these are the speakers that we're using here, so I get an idea of what it's all about. So right now, I'm going into an input here, and I can control the volume there. It can be either mic or line level. Okay, the difference mainly is this microphone, if it's not plugged into anything, it needs power to be able to push to a speaker. Line level would be your phone. You can plug headphones into your phone and hear the music play. But if you plug headphones directly into this, you're not going to get anything. So that's keeping in mind that this is a difference of 20 decibels. So like 20 decibels of energy actually ends up kind of pushing the signal out. So yeah, this mixer can handle 2 different inputs. You can tell at mic level, and this one ends up being a line level stereo. So that way, if you have a stereo device you want to plug in, it can go left and right. So if I really wanted to run a whole bunch of microphones, I could bring in a small mixer and then plug it right into there and then have more control over some of my sound. So that's what we're using here in the room. And the top output is going back to our cameraman. In the back, a camera lady, I should say, in the back of the room. So that's how we're into passing the sound through. That's going to keep you pretty clean. I did hear a little bit of buzzing sound, so I don't know. You're going to have to fix something in post, and it might be the wireless microphone that's acting up there. The world's really gone digital for a lot of the stuff that we end up doing. If you've seen the sound system in the other room that we're using for our conference, that one is a Behringer XR18. I got one at the studio. That's our studio model. I got one that I use for my band when I'm playing out, if I'm supplying the sound system. I got one in my church. I love them because they're just, they have Wi-Fi capability, but the Wi-Fi is kind of crappy. So you will, with some of these digital mixers, you might want to end up having like an external Wi-Fi so you can have it isolated. So if any of you were in the other room and your phone suddenly found a wireless site that said Black Death, that's my wireless connector for my mixer to discourage people from, obviously coming on board. But yeah, here's an example where I'm using the digital mixer with a bunch of microphones at a candidates debate, and I'm mixing it from the back of the room. And a lot of the stuff that used to be in the analog world is now available in the digital world. So I can go in and actually trim the edges of my sound capture so that I can get rid of the unwanted noise. So if I had some kind of hums coming in, I can kind of shave it off with the digital mixer. This band in particular was playing, and I got a hold of the bass player the day before, and I said, "Hey, what are you using for a mixer? Because we want to tap into your sound." He goes, "We're using an XR18. I'm like, "Fantastic." So I just brought down my MacBook, plugged in USB into their mixer, and then with the software that I was using, I could record every single microphone off that stage straight onto my MacBook with free software. So I was using what they call Tracks, it's by waves.com, it's called Tracks Live. There's also another program that's out there called Reaper that people will use for doing multi-channel capture. And one thing I found with recording a band like this, and using that software, it'll grab from where the microphone basically plugs into the sound system. So it's not going through all the processing. It's giving me the raw signal as it comes in. Then you have to figure out how to remix the band to make it sound like they're really there. And I think with a lot of the environments that we're recording in, especially for live music, this one has a giant dome across the top. There's a lot of reflections and reverb that's getting captured in the microphone straight off the bat. But in the remixing world, the only thing I'm really adding to the sound would be a little echo, a little reverb for our singers. The rest of the instruments sound perfectly fine for the mix. Here's it with the candidates debate that you saw. Here's kind of a simple setup that we were using. So I'm using my MacBook wirelessly controlling this mixer. If I wanted to record off of it, I would just plug a USB in, and I could record and mix at the same time. And then I'd go into the JBL speaker there, And then I'd also send, and mixers have a left-right out. When we're doing sound reinforcement, we're pretty much just going only one channel because it's mono. We don't care to have fancy stereo in our world, at least when it's recorded, because obviously we're pushing it out in mono anyhow. But the second channel, I can go into my TriCaster, my recording device. It can go into a camera if I want to, and that way I can have another isolated recording. But I'm kind of a man of redundancy, so I like to usually hook in that USB here, record to that device, and record into my TriCaster so that if one thing fails, I still have a backup. Redundancy in this world is a good idea. Know your microphones. So we saw a couple different examples here, but really know your microphones. For example, this microphone I'm wearing right now is an omnidirectional microphone. So if I had a conversation with somebody close to me, I could pick up both of us. Then there's cardioid, which is more of a isolated pickup pattern. And that's great for when you're doing sound reinforcement, because an omnidirectional microphone, if I crank that sucker up, you're going to start hearing some pretty bad feedback. With the cardioid, you can really get it isolated. The supercardioid or the hypercardioid is going to be like your shotgun microphone, where it really just kind of picks up that close pattern. And one thing, Boyce is saying, we point it at people. Sometimes pointing it down is good. It's kind of isolated from above. You've seen people with a boom arm. But also going from underneath is also pretty good too. And I found that when I've done like a grade school band concert where everybody gets up and does their little solos, we'd have an area where the solo performers would come in, walk in. I'd usually have microphones pointing straight up from the floor, straight at them. And that usually really isolates and picks up a good signal too. Then trying to have something that's up there in their face.
Make sure you have a shock mount if you're putting it on the floor.
Yeah, and if you don't have a shock mount, another thing you can use is like your mouse pad. If you can get a nice foam rubbery mouse pad, or even old carpeting. So just take a swatch of old carpeting and throw it underneath it. That's going to dampen a lot of your unwanted noises. So here's a variety of different microphones. So you have your shotgun. So that's just the windscreen for that particular shotgun. This one is a foam windscreen, but that's a stereo model. So Audio-Technica sells one that's a stereo. And this cable is an irregular XLR cable. It's got two regular XLR cables to a 5-pin cable. So our XLRs are like 3. This one has 5. So you can actually buy a 5-pin cable, like a 30-footer, hook it into this, and then still have that breakout cable in order to plug it into your audio devices. Of course, he talked about the SM57. That's like the rock and roll, picking up your amplifier type mic. This is just another interview mic. This one here is an omnidirectional, and this one down here is cardioid. So whenever you look at a microphone and it has like a little circle on the edge, if it looks like a heart, then you know you got your cardioid. If it's a circle, then you know it's an omni. And just keep in mind that omni is great for if you're going to record something like a 4-piece band in a nice quiet environment. It's like a little orchestra piece. You could put an omnidirectional in the middle of that, and that can pick up a lot of good sounds. I mean, if you ever seen like the bluegrass guys and they're all standing around one microphone, most likely it is kind of a cardioid but a wide pattern in one direction in order to pick up everybody. Here's some examples of wireless. This one's a Shure system. So you have a transmitter, two transmitters and one receiver, so you can only use one at a time. But here's the only exception. This is another. Wants me to install software. No, thank you. The one over here, what I'm using right now is a Rode, and it's a pretty cheap, good option for microphones. But down here, there's 2 of them with one receiver. This one's a stereo transmitter, so there's a wireless Go 2, which if you hook it up to your computer, you can tell it to record as well onto these little pucks. So they can record up to, I think, 24 hours a piece. So you could use those devices and use them as a recorder, as well as plugging them into your camera for sound reinforcement. This one's a parabolic microphone. I think the guy's out of like Milwaukee or Milton or Janesville. It's called the Sound Shark. So it's just a smaller version than what you'd see watching the sports on TV, and you see the guy with the big giant yellow thing picking up the calls from the quarterback in the middle of the field. So That's another option to a shotgun microphone. It does a pretty good job, but keep in mind when you're using a shotgun microphone for something off at a distance or a parabolic microphone like that one, is that you're going to be picking up all the noise between you and the thing you want to pick up. So if for some reason we got a person with a runny nose in the front of the room and you want to hear the person in the back of the room, you're going to get the runny nose and the person in the back of the room as they talk. This other thing right here is just a holder for this, so you can put it on a mic stand and share it that way. Here's some choir microphones, which I like to use if you're going to be obviously recording a choir, or if you're doing a musical performance recording and you don't want it to be, you want to be able to pick up as much as you can. They really kind of pick up like this. So they work really well for a choir. You do have to kind of keep in mind the distance from the microphone to your subject needs to be a unit of 1 to 3 if you're going to end up having 2 microphones and using them at the same time, because you don't want them to be too close to each other, or you might lose frequencies. So for example, if one microphone's forward like this and the other microphone's back like that, and you're hearing an orchestra playing, you might lose some frequencies because of the way sound travels. You know, the higher frequencies could cancel themselves out, so you could end up with some kind of patchiness to a violin sound. Most people wouldn't notice that. A sound engineer would. So you just kind of want to make sure your microphones are close to the together. If you're going to be using them as a stereo pair, you can put them like this as an XY pattern. Some people will do them like that. Nah, it needs to be more like capsule on top of capsule if you can get a holder that'll point like that. That way you can guarantee that all sound sources are hitting those 2 microphones at the same time. I know I'm kind of overloading everybody, but okay, here's a subject matter that concerns all of us in the room, is what's balanced and what's unbalanced. So you know your headphone jack has these what they call like a ring tip sleeve. So here's the tip, here's the ring, and here's the sleeve. If you're plugging in a stereo, well, in the world of XLR, you have your 3 pins. One actually kind of reduces the hum by sending the signal back against itself, so it cancels out any kind of extra hum. Well, you can end up with this version in this device, and that's different than a stereo headphones type of hookup. It's considered balanced in order to prevent the hum. So you have to keep in mind with some professional equipment, this could either be stereo or it could be, balanced. So the concept is balanced or unbalanced. If it was unbalanced, it wouldn't have that ring in the middle. It'd be just a straight bar there. This is from the Yamaha Sound book of sound reinforcement, and it's literally every potential wiring configuration going from one source to another. So if we want to go from an RCA plug to a 1/4 inch, this is how you would solder those connections, or that's how it should flow. Here's from just your standard 2 to the other. So the bigger wire here is considered braided or shielded, the outer. So if you ever cut a cable in half, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a wire in the middle that's coated with some kind of plastic, and then there'll be this mesh around it. So each of these kind of shows you an example of going from one source to another. Here's a stereo to stereo, that's fine. Here's an unbalanced 1/4 inch to an XLR. So they show you how to wire them. So each one's a little different. You could buy a cable and think it's going to work, and it could be wired sending a signal this way or sending a signal that way. And so it won't work for this device, but it will work for a totally different device. What we're seeing here, this is actually a mixer on a little portable speaker. And so we got an XLR input, and there's a little circle in the middle. That's a 1/4 inch input, so you could either plug in something like this, or you could plug in something that has an end like a regular XLR. But it does also have 1/4 inch, and it has Bluetooth as well. But it has a line out here, which is a 1/4 inch jack, so you can feed it into another sound source. That one, sending it out, is considered line level, but it's also unbalanced. So it's only that version of a plug going out. So it's not going to work with a stereo cable. But you could take that and you could plug it into another amplifier in order to to boost your sound signal. So you got to kind of keep in mind when you're tapping off of existing sounds, you need to make sure whether it's balanced or unbalanced, because if it suddenly doesn't work and you're hearing a bunch of hum, then chances are you're not knowing, what your source is for that particular sound. Okay, here's an example that I use a lot of the time in the field when we're recording sound. The band brings the sound system. They got all their stuff plugged into here. And what we want to do is grab the signal, and we'll use something like a Zoom audio recorder in order to get the 2 channels off the mixing board. The Zoom has switches on it to go from mic level to line level, so you can switch between whatever your source is. Most mixers will push out a line level signal, and so you'd have it switched to a line level. So if you're ever not knowing whether a thing is line level or mic level, you can flip between the two and listen to the difference. If you hear a lot of distortion, chances are it's a line level signal coming to you. And sometimes you can go, well, I can turn it all the way down to 2 and still pick up the sound. Well, if you were to listen to that recording afterwards, you'd find that would sound a lot worse than you turning it up to 7 and flipping a switch to dampen the sound and turn it into a line level. These microphones, it's irrelevant what brand microphones these are, but in my setup, I usually use like a choir microphone on both those. Do you know what our time is? I don't know how long the session goes till. Oh, great. All right, and every band's different. Fortunately, the summer series that we're going to be filming, we're using the same sound engineer, and he's a guy who's run sound for my band. So I know exactly what equipment he's going to be bringing. So I'm really, really pleased because I will have uniformity moving forward. But most of the stuff I've recorded has been anything under the sun. Here's the Mark Croft Band. They had a drummer, bass, fiddle, guitar player, and they were using the mixer similar to the one I have in the other room, but they were using a 12-channel version. So unfortunately, the 12-channel version, I have the 18-channel version, and that one I can record with the software I was talking about earlier, Tracks Live, and I can keep each of those microphones separately coming in. Well, with the 12-channel version, it'll only do stereo, but I could actually, just plug in a USB and capture it that way. Well, these guys were using every single in and out on that mixer, and they had nothing to give me. My option would be to, kind of like the JBL over here I said earlier, has like a line out that we can go to the mixer. If I can find something like that, I'm good. But what I ended up creating instead was this crazy adapter here. And I plugged that sucker into the headphone jack on their mixer, the one thing that they're not using. And then I run it, I go to an XLR. So I'm running an XLR cable 50 feet over to my recording equipment. And then at the 50-foot mark, I got another XLR cable, which breaks it out into 2/4 inch jacks so I can plug it into my sound gear and keep left channel right and right channel separately. Because basically headphones even though it's balanced left, right in the stereo, but in the audio world of capturing, it's kind of, I'm isolating the left channel from the right channel, and all of a sudden it's an unbalanced signal coming to me. So this is like the raw version that'll save your butt if you have nothing to grab off of a mixing board from a band that's playing. But that's one option of craziness. Here's another band that we ended up playing. We could grab sound off the mixing board, but I always like to have a backup plan in case something goes wrong with my software capturing, because I've had files not record. Like all of a sudden I'm recording with 32 tracks, and when it's done recording, I hit stop and then I close my computer down too fast. Well, if you're recording multiple channels of audio and you're using a software, when the concert's done, you hit stop. Just let your computer sit there for about 15 minutes before you finally decide to close it down. But I would save it immediately, because what generally happens is it's still churning the data and trying to think of what it just recorded. So if you are doing a multiple channel recording, like what I'm doing with my MacBook, you'd want to use a Mac product, because PCs really kind of die as soon as they get past the hour mark for grabbing audio if you're trying to do multiple channels of audio. So you need to kind of keep that in mind. But in this case, we also run microphones in case we have failure. But I got a little choir mic here, and I got a little choir mic there picking up. And the whole reason why I put them there, this guy likes to play a Leslie box. Does anybody know what a Leslie box is? Okay, what's a Leslie? There you go.
Got a spinning speaker,
Yeah, so he's playing a keyboard, and he's got this lever on the side where he can spin the speaker. So it's just whipping around, and it goes whoa, 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 whoa. It's this crazy, weird echo sound. I want to capture that well. Well, I could get something from what's feeding off the board, and it's like, if I really wanted to get that right, I'd probably put 2 microphones pointing like that in order to get the stereo sound. But in this case, I just kind of put it there so I could pick up that sound. Sometimes I'll put a 3rd microphone in there just so I can kind of pick up the drummer in the background. And that way I can kind of blend everything later. I'd rather get something off the board because that's going to be the cleanest. But this gives it the extra life that makes it sound like a live recording without turning it into mud. When you do remix these different sources, if you're using choir mics and taking a feed off the sound system, you have to keep in mind that distance, and the sound might sound weird and echoey from the board and the mic being combined together. So you might have to take your audio files and kind of move them within your timeline to make sure they kind of line up right, or you might have a weird slap back echoey sound from the clean off the board to the microphone capturing the sound in your space. So you need to kind of keep in mind when you remix things, you want to have it kind of right on. It's kind of like us, take 1, there's a clapper, it hits. We use that to kind of sync ourselves up. You could do something like that if you wanted to on the stage in front of one of the microphones that they're using and see how it compares with the microphones you have on the stage here. One thing I kind of generally go with when I'm remixing sound is I look for that one moment where a drummer just whacks a snare really hard, and I use that kind of as a sync for all my sources of sound that I'm going to be using when I mix. And anybody who's filmed any kind of band like this and they're like 100 feet away, when that drummer hits that snare, if you were to slow it down and look at it at a frame of when it's in contact, 100 feet away, that sound might be 1/30th of a second off from when it strikes because of sound traveling distances. So you do have to keep that in mind when you're remixing. So here's the sound engineer, and you can see if you want to sit here and count, I'm guessing this is a 32-track board, and right now he's using basically 16 channels of audio. He might be looping some stuff back here for monitor purposes for the band. But for me, I got my USB plug in, and here I am multi-tracking. And you can see all the squiggly marks. So each of those channels, or each individual microphone that's plugged in, is being captured here. And you can see the different levels. And each one of the little pink things is actually armed, which means it's in record mode. Anything that's white is not. So the sound man said, all right, I'm going to be using this much for this band, and then this is for the rest of the band. So he might have like the drum kit in this region, so it's every single instrument on that drum kit is amplified, and then the rest of it could be the band, just so you can kind of keep it grouped together and separate. So yeah, I'll take all these files and I'll remix them later. One bit of advice I would say, if you're going to get into the world of multi-track recording, you might want to end up trying to not do your video editing and your mixing of your audio at the same time, because your computer could crash. So you might want to do your audio recording as it's one, with whatever software you choose to use, whether it's like Vegas, or you could use Adobe Premiere and mix your audio. You'd rather use like an audio program if you could, but if you just had to mix it, I would just make sure you make your stereo track the way you like it to sound, and then marry it up with your video later. But working in USB out into a mixer is great. Firewire used to be the thing. Not everybody's. If somebody has an older board, they might have something that's FireWire, but I haven't seen very many FireWire mixing boards out there lately. A lot of it just tends to be USB out. It's kind of the standard. So here's another band I ended up recording, and whoever was running the sound had it pushed too hard, so what was coming off the board wasn't really prime for me. So I kind of relied a little bit more on my choir mics picking up the clean sound of things when they got a little too distorted. But we also took a tap off of their speaker out of that line feed out like we had on the back of the JBL speaker over here. So this is what I filmed on Wednesday. I rolled in here about 10:30, 10:45 at night. I was pretty tired. But this is kind of showing you how I'm capturing the sound and bringing it into my TriCaster. So this device was in a break room where it's only for employees only, and it took a feed off the sound system. So I went into the side of my Zoom audio recorder here, and so it switched to line level as it's coming into the 2 jacks on here. Well, I tried using this port out here, which is an audio out signal. I tried patching it into my Sony recorder directly into the mic in feed, and it had this awful hum, this awful buzz, this noise that just wouldn't go away. One thing I've discovered over the years, and when you start recording something at one location and you're running it several hundred feet someplace else, sometimes it's best to just bring in some kind of a wireless device, because that can take the hum out of a lot of things just by having a wireless device. There have been times where I've ran a wireless device, a transmitter and a receiver, 5 feet apart from each other, just to eliminate the hum and the noise that's coming through the line. So in this case, what I did was I hooked up one of these the stereo Rode thing, one channel, off the auxiliary out into this, and then I had my receiver hooked up to my camera, bringing the audio in, and made my level that way and checked it and listened to it. It sounded really good. And then I took the other stereo receiver and I put it up on the podium to pick up the announcer if this thing didn't record well from that. So now I'm recording the audio into my little Sony camera. Well, then I ended up taking that signal from that camera. We have the HDMI cable going to my TriCaster. Well, in order to get to the TriCaster, it's going HDMI to an SDI cable so I can run at a real long distance. And I'm using the embedded sound that's coming from that camera as my sound feed into my TriCaster and grabbing it, and it was really clean. And Tina was the one who was doing the video switching for me, and she could hear out of one ear, she could hear a crystal clear sound from the podium, and out of the other ear, she could hear the other crystal clear sound from the sound system within the room. So now she's got 2 different channels she can work with. But yeah, the beauty of when you're in the digital world, if you're using a bunch of cameras with like a TriCaster, don't think that you have to have another mixer on the front of the TriCaster. A lot of them will allow you to use the embedded audio from your camera as a sound source, coming into to your TriCaster, and you can use that. It's great so you don't have to run microphones all the way across the room. You can run one cable for your camera and use the camera as an audio source grabbing it. The more pro cameras, like the one in the back of the room, will have XLR, signal coming in, and it's still embedding the sound. So, are we close to how much time do we got?
Oh, it's 11.
Okay, is this when it's supposed to end? You got 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes. Good. All right. So here's the Zoom, just a little close-up picture of it, and here's where I got it plugged into the stereo receiver. So I couldn't just plug in. If I plugged in just a single cord going into this thing, it would kind of mesh together, left and right together in a mono signal. So instead I use a little mini 1/8 inch to 2/4 inches, and I plug it in. That way I can keep my left and my right separate. And this capsule on top is that XY pattern I was talking about, having your microphones like that so that your left and your right are picking up the signal at the same time right next to each other. These are some of the other attachments because you can change out the top capsule. They do have a shotgun microphone version as well. This one's a middle side microphone, so that's really a lot of people that are dealing with FM radio, a lot of the low power FM people that we have here at the conference really like the mid side. And so that's kind of like the microphone's picking up, one channel's picking up this way, and it's also kind of picking up that way, and it makes it nice and warm and fuzzy. This one's just another XLR adapter that plugs onto the top. I think both of these actually have little 1/8 inch jacks on the side that'll take a stereo signal. So I could go 1/8 inch from that little transmitter to the 1/8 inch plug here, and it'll record as a stereo left, right coming in. So, and that's just the scary mixing board that I have back at the library. Are there any questions? Is there something that's just boggling your mind that you're just dying to know the answer to? Yes?
Well, it's not specifically with this, but it's about audio.
Yeah.
So I'm running audio with an 1/8 inch cable into an ATEM Mini Pro. there's a mic 1, mic 2 input.
Yeah.
And from the little mixer I'm running it from the mixer it sounds crystal clear, at least to my ears. Probably not to yours, but the mixer sound, the output of the mixer sounds good. But as soon as I plug the output of the mixer into the ATM Mini Pro, I get a line noise in the mixer.
Yeah, I haven't dabbled with that Blackmagic product. In my system that I have, I use vMix for recording a lot of stuff at the library, and I'll take a feed off the sound system that you see pictured here. But that sound that's coming in, I'm using a separate USB audio interface to grab that signal. So I'll use, Focusrite's a really nice brand, but there's a lot of other inexpensive brands that are right around $50. I think Art's another one. I just remember the little black boxes. And they'll have like a 1/4 inch or XLR combo jack that you can plug into. But you might want to take your audio in going USB if you can get it into that.
Well, I do have a USB output on the mixer, but that wouldn't go to the ATEM Mini Pro, would it? Because
No, well,
it'd have to go to a computer and record it to the computer.
Yeah. If I was going to use the ATEM and use it as a switcher and record onto this device, let's say using OBS, I would have it plugged in the way it would go USB, but then I would probably have another USB for audio. So I'd have 2 separate ones just to keep your audio crystal clear and clean. Because anytime you're kind of going from some source to an 1/8 inch, you're basically, if it's a stereo signal coming in, you're basically turning it into an unbalanced signal. It's just left-right combined together, and not something like an XLR input. So if you use a USB interface, you'd rather have your signal coming in balanced if you could, because that'll eliminate a lot of the hums that you would end up finding. But yeah, it's kind of I'd almost take that feed and plug it into a different device and listen to it in order to determine where that hum's coming from.
Yeah, because at first I thought it was just, a grounding issue or something.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing you can think about, and we didn't really dabble in it here, is in the post world. I mean, once you've had the recorded sound, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with Audacity. It does have a noise cancellation bit in there where you can go into your sound file, find a quiet spot where you hear no noise, and kind of sample that chunk to determine where that noise is coming from. You can tell it in Audacity how strong of a reduction you want, because if you eliminate a background buzz too much, it could sound like you're talking into a can, and you don't want that to happen, but you'd rather just kind of reduce it a little bit. I'd always try to fix it, if you can, a little bit with EQ, but also consider using something like the Audacity program. Isotope, which is IZOTOP or something like that, is another company that sells a software program where you can eliminate that sound. And if you're using the Adobe suite, I'm pretty sure the audio program that's there has that kind of a cancellation as well. Even the Magix, which used to be the Sony Vegas and all that, there was a noise reduction software that's there. It does a pretty good job, but I found Audacity or Isotope to work just as good. So, any other questions? Is everybody like a professional sound engineer now that and they're ready for any kind of a live event where they need to split it into 100 different directions like that? Yes?
I have one quick question. So we do pep rallies in the gym at the high school, and we get students who come up, and they're always afraid of the mic, right? I always try to tell them, you got to be up here, it's ice cream cone,
Yep.
lollipop type of thing. Okay. And so, more of a lollipop, sorry, not ice cream cone. Anyway, they're always going to back away, and we always get feedback. And so the pep rallies are just this chaotic, constant reverb. It's probably part of our cheap mic, so I was going to get the Beta 58, Shure Beta 58. What do you think? Is that a good choice? I mean, that's like the cheap choice, but if there's something better, it's going to be like, get this, and you're going to help yourself.
Yeah, if you're doomed with somebody who does not want to get close to a microphone, I don't know if you want to end up going with something that's going to be more of a hypercardioid, a tighter pattern, similar to what you get from a shotgun microphone. That might be the way to do it. The other option is that you place a mic somewhere and then you put a big red X on the floor and say, students have to stand here. There was one time where I did sound reinforcement for a tree lighting ceremony, and they had a choir there, and I put my microphones up for the choir, and I said, okay, I need you to stand right here. Well, as soon as the thing started up, they moved 5 feet back, and I got people complaining that they can't hear anything. Can you turn it up more? Any more I turn it up, it's going to be feeding back all over the place. So the next time I end up doing this event, I'm going to have the mics even closer to them, and I'm probably going to put down tape and stand on this line. The conductor can be on the other side of the microphone so that you're just promising that you're keeping it at distance. I've run sound doing something similar to a pep rally in a high school gymnasium, and it's a nightmare because I'd always have somebody come up to me and go, the show choir, I can't hear the show choir. And I go, yeah, they're dancing all over the place. At one point in time, they're 2 feet from the microphone. Another point in time, they're 20 feet away from the microphone, and you're doomed. But yeah, I'd say if you're doing sound reinforcement in a gymnasium, you just have to almost put a red X on the floor and say you have to stand on that. Just make sure all the kids are aware of it, and they can choose to be quieter if they want to, but at least you're isolating that sound close to the microphone if you could.
And unfortunately, it's counterintuitive. People, as soon as they hear feedback, they're going to move the mic further away, which is going to make it worse.
Yeah.
So just try to explain that to people. I mean, they're human beings. They're going to do it wrong, but at least try to do that. I would say maybe if you're looking at the Beta 58, Shure also has the SM87, which has a tighter pickup pattern than the 58s or the 57s. The 87 has a tighter pickup pattern, so maybe look at that.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to go with exclusively Shure. Audio Technica has a lot of great microphones, and I used to worked for Guitar Center back in 1990, or 91, something like that, 91, and I sold microphones, and I tested the SM58s right next to an Audio Technica microphone. I actually thought the Audio Technica was a nicer microphone at half the price. So, I would keep in mind, though, if you need to have a tighter pattern, think about what I got here. Omni's going to pick up all over the place. You don't want to use that for sound reinforcement, which is your amplified sound. But you'd want something a little bit tighter. This is going to be more along the line of your SM58.
I think that actually is.
That's an SM58?
No, that's an 87.
87.
Or 78. SM78. Yeah,
So yeah, that's a tighter pattern. This is actually taken from Shure's booklet on sound capture. So yeah, I would go check out Shure's website and look at some of the PDFs you can download that'll teach you how to grab sound. I didn't even cover how to mic a piano, but there's different ways of miking a piano and miking a guitar. And it's funny because some of the books that Shure puts out, the PDFs, will tell you, okay, you can put one microphone here for the acoustic guitar. And then they have another book that's intended for more engineers, and then they're like, you need 2 microphones here. So, I mean, there's better ways of doing it, but I mean, in what we're doing, we're usually kind of scaling down. But yeah, if somebody else is bringing a PA system, you can tap into it. There's that option. Another thing too, and I know, we should be done. Yeah, another thing too is another way of grabbing sound. If you can't, you can also do auxiliary sends. So if there's a bigger mixing board, there's an auxiliary send where you can tell the sound engineer, can you just send me an aux send of this signal? Sometimes they can do what they call matrix mixing or whatever. So they can just basically give you what they're pushing out to the PA system to you, similar in style. Keep in mind what the mixing board is picking up and what's being amplified can be slightly different. So that's why it's always important to kind of have a couple live microphones around, because if you put a set of headphones on and then you listen to the live band and the environment they're in, it could be totally different. You could have something where all of a sudden you're not hearing any bass, you take the headphones off and you're hearing all kinds of bass. Because maybe something wasn't mic'd, maybe the mic wasn't close enough, or maybe there's enough sound coming from that source that it's already good enough on its own instead of being amplified. So.
How would you get rid of the air conditioner, just in toast, or just use a carburetor to get it on?
Yeah, I try to get closer. One other thing you can do too in a windy environment, there's also what they call a dead cat, which is similar to this, but it's like a longer hair. And the concept behind it is if you ever see a movie and there's a wind whipping across and it's in Alaska and it doesn't seem to faze the dog, that's because their fur's going all over the place, and it kind of breaks the wind and deflects it and puts it in a way that it can't seem to travel properly. Even a foam screen is a flat surface to a certain degree, even though it has a porous thing. But if it has fur on it, there's less of a chance that noise is going to carry across. But yeah, with ventilation, and most of the time it's at 80 hertz. Oh yeah, and then we're going to be done. Here's the last one. Like this microphone has a little switch on it where it shows it kind of curves down. That's to eliminate the 80 roll off at 80 hertz, and that really is for removing the hum out of the air conditioner to a certain degree. The rest you'll probably have to fix in post. If you have more questions, we're available. We should pass this off to the next crew that's coming in before we eat their time up. So thank you all for coming to our little session.